Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening or good night. Wherever you are joining us from, thank you for joining us today for our 90 days and counting. I am Sekeita Lewis Johnson. I am the Accredited Provider Program Director at Lactation Education Resources. I bring you a background of about 20 years in breastfeeding counseling and about 15 years as an IBCLC. I've worked in a hospital, I've worked private practice, I've worked in home visiting, I've done all sorts of things, and I am also a nurse educator. My primary background has been in labor and delivery and maternity care. So thank you for joining us.
Hi, everybody. I'm Angela Love-Zaranka. I am the Program Director for Lactation Education Resources. I too have experience in this field. I have been a breastfeeding support counselor in the community for over 30 years, been board certified for 25, and the other thing that I have done is I've actually sat on the IBLCE Board of Directors, as well as their Exam Development Committee, and the International Lactation Consultant Association Professional Association's Board of Directors. I currently serve on the Human Milk Banking Association of North America Board of Directors. So those organizations have shaped the profession for the past 40 plus years. And so I'm honored to be with you today. It is a great pleasure for me to share with you some of the things that I've learned over the years on how you can prepare for the IBLCE exam. So first things is if you would like to ask questions. So you'll notice in the GoToWebinar platform in the interface that there is a spot there on your desktop if you're listening to us today and participating from a desktop or a laptop. You can take a look here and you can see where the blue arrow is pointing. You'll see where the question box is. So you can type in anything that you would like, questions or comments. And one comment I would love for you to message in to us today is, where in the world are you participating from today? So please do let us know where you are located. If you are participating on a mobile device, you can find it here where the green arrow is pointing at the bottom of the interface. So you can please feel free to type in any comments, any questions that you have. Now, we have a couple of people helping us today with the questions that you may have about the IBLCE exam, and they are from our amazing customer support team. We have Kim Weber as well as Julie Grimes. Both of them are board certified lactation consultants, and so they too come from a variety of backgrounds, and they are well poised to be able to help you to answer the questions for preparing for the IBLCE exam. We also have Jill, who is part of our amazing tech team. So if you have any tech questions, you can pop that into the question box. If you would like to take a look at the handouts, we do have a couple of handouts to provide to you, which will provide you with a few blog posts which you may find helpful, as well as some helpful resources, some really helpful URLs. And so feel free to download those two handouts. One of them is a study guide, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in just a few minutes. So we're going to kick it off and move to Sekeita, who's going to talk about the objectives for today. Sekeita?
Thank you. Thank you, Angela. Thank you so much. All right. So we're going to talk about today's objectives. And Angela, did we lose our screen? I don't see it, so I just want to make sure that our viewers can see it.
Now, that's a good point. I turned off the screen as opposed to turning
Oh,
off the camera. How about now?
there you go.
Thank
Teamwork
you.
makes the dream work. Thank you. All right. So, objectives for today. I love this quote: proper preparation prevents poor performance. That's a mouthful, right? It's called the 5 Ps. And this was coined by James Baker, who was a former Secretary of State. But we're here today because you will probably be sitting for the exam soon. So before sitting the exam, it is extremely important to plan. So this meeting is to help you get organized so you feel well prepared when it's time to sit. So today's webinar will be helpful if you are taking the exam in the next 90 days or taking the exam this year. It's best to organize at least 60 to 90 days before the exam. So today we're going to walk you through a plan to help you feel calm, prepared, and happy, hopefully. After today, please don't put off studying until the last minute. Just because you're dreading it, because you will definitely need to pace yourself. There's so much information that you don't want to get overwhelmed. So developing your plan, let's get to it. Let's talk about developing your plan and how to study for the IBLCE exam. So let's talk about some advice from those who have come before me, come before you. Let's talk about it. Take some time to really consider what learning method works best for you. If it includes something like flashcards, start to make those flashcards now. Don't put it off. If you took the 90-hour course through LER and you still have access, review the courses, particularly the courses that you had some challenges in. Look over your notes from the course. If you've attended any webinars or in-services given by lactation consultants, you might want to take a look at those as well. You want to gather up all your material. The best advice going forward when you're looking at that material is to relax about remembering all the specifics. For instance, like the cranial nerves, all the enzymes, all the living cells. You don't want to memorize those things. One of the advice that I often give to my students is when you're reading anything, read it for like you're reading a novel, like you're into a novel. You're reading to learn, to engage with it, not reading to learn. If you can kind of wrap your mind around that aspect, that would help with even some of those enzymes, but you don't have to remember them. So how to know what to know? That's a heavy question. It's not possible for you to know everything. That's fair game on this comprehensive, broad-based, international certification exam. It's just not possible. The range of information is virtually limitless. But according to the IBLCE, everything that has been published in books or in journals in the past year may be included on the exam. And that's an incredible amount of knowledge. However, keep in mind that this exam is for entry-level practitioners and it's designed to separate those who will be competent lactation practitioners and those who will not be safe working with families. So be at ease that it is an entry-level exam. The exam is very practice-oriented, which means that the more experience you have, the better. If you only have practiced in one setting, consider widening your scope of practice, which means you could consider practicing by attending a local support group meeting. You could visit a clinic where lactation support and clinical care is provided or offered, such as an outpatient lactation clinic. Maybe you could even assist in a pediatrician's office. Other options could include visiting an NICU lactation, neonatal intensive care unit lactation, meaning you could follow or observe what does the lactation consultant do in the NICU. And you could even consider following someone that's in private practice. Even a few days of observation in another setting can be extremely enlightening. Our Facebook group. LER has a Facebook group set up for our students from either our lactation consulting program, training program, or our exam review enriched course. It is not open. It is not an open group, so you'll have to send a request. Ooh, let me get myself together. It is not an open group, so you need to send a request, and you'll have to ask, and you would have to answer a few questions to be added to the group. Now, I sat for the exam almost 5 years ago for the second time. I joined this group. Even as a practicing lactation consultant, this group was everything for me. I love the questions every day. So consider if this is a method that would work for you, consider joining it. But it's a great way to discuss sticky questions, share helpful resources, and to locate someone that you could probably study with. Personal study. So I'm going to switch to just talking about you. How do you get organized? How do you prepare yourself? And then in the end, how do you reward yourself? So research shows that material that is learned over a long length of time is retained better than cramming. Even if you've made it through high school, college, using this technique, don't do it for this exam. It's way too important. In other words, I'm saying get organized. Put together your own study material. Putting together your own study material is one of the most effective ways of learning. You are essentially writing in your own handwriting, and you're creating your own study notes. Personal study notes help you to focus on the most relevant information to support your understanding of the topic. As you rearrange and you write the information, this process helps your working memory to quickly recall the key points. Also, you want to put together all of your books. I alluded to this earlier, all of your study notes, all of your lactation course materials, and create a study place that is dedicated for just your exam study. This is the designated space. Set up about an hour or two block of times to do the readings, to do any practice tests, to get yourself organized, but really make an intentional point to set aside some time. Your study session should have the same weight as any other important commitment, so you don't want to put it off because it's so essential to your success on the exam. So be prepared. A reasonable amount of time will also help you to feel very confident. If you have a lot of clinical experience and you are taking the exam for the second time, make time to study. Remember, I said I sat 5 years ago. I had a lot of clinical experience, but it was so helpful for me to develop a study plan to ensure that I was up to date, to ensure that I knew what I thought I knew going into the exam. Don't assume that just because you have a lot of practice that you can put it off without studying. If you've been actively practicing, especially as a lactation consultant, and keeping up with the ever evolving evidence, and or attending conferences, maybe you can pass without studying. But if you didn't, you would feel horrible. And then once you've organized yourself, got all of these things in place, reward yourself at the end of your preparation and then at the end of your study sessions. Take a hike, get lost on social media. Don't get too lost though, because that can take away some time from you. Take a relaxing bath, watch television, whatever it is that sets up a reward for you, do that. It's very important because it actually helps you to want to study again. So I talked about personal study. This is more about group study. If group study is your thing, if it is, try to find a local study group or a study partner or a small online group of people that come from different clinical backgrounds, but who are committed to consistent study and meetings. And I have to say this about groups. Sometimes you set up a group and you talk about everything else except studying, not that type of study group. You really want a dedicated study group. If there are even a couple of people in your area that's getting ready for the exam, it helps to bounce ideas off of other people. You can share anxieties, and you can also share study resources. If you do not know anyone in your area that is taking the certification exam and you would like to meet someone face-to-face or via Zoom, put in a request in our LER IBLCE exam study group on Facebook. All right, study schedule. Use a study guide, and we have provided one for you in the handout section or attached to the recording or to the to plan your strategy. Study guides, same as rubrics, I always say, they're like almost like a cheat sheet, but not really, because you do have to do some work. But if you get our study guide and you plan your time when you are most alert, you will definitely reap the rewards from your preparation. And pick a time when you're least likely to be interrupted. If you have children, try to figure out, okay, they get out of school at this time, or maybe not, or they go to bed at this time, and try to negotiate your time with your family so that you have some time when they agree that they just won't interrupt you. So this is a screenshot of the 30 days handout. It provides a list of topics on the IBLCE detailed content outline and activities you can do to prepare. Note that it is a 30 days plan. Of course, it's best to do it to start more than 30 days in advance. You can start now. You can set a goal for 60 days or 90 days prior and plan out when you can work on each topic. And you try to figure out, start using about 2 to 3 days per topic, especially with those topics that you're not very familiar with. Others you might can spend an afternoon looking at, but the ones that you're not comfortable with, you want to plan to spend a few days to make sure you retain the information. And pace yourself. We talked about starting in advance, but maybe take a few days off. And then take a break so that your brain can kind of like, okay, I got all this information. I've learned that. Now let me go back to it. This handout can be found as an attachment to this webinar, either live or recorded. Now this is a visual plan. This is a general idea of what a sample study plan could look like. Planning out dates, content, and study partner can help you to remain on track and accountable. Of course, we know urgent situations will arise, can arise, do arise, so prioritize accordingly. And if you have a study partner, consider planning together, and you can choose the topics to work on together. For example, let's just say that Angela is my study partner, and we are planning to meet next week. And we've chosen a topic. We've chosen, let's say, developmental milestones. Before meeting, it's important that I study my text, and I already know Angela will study hers. Therefore, when we meet together, we can review similarities and differences in the information. And if we find a conflict, we can find other resources to review and come to a decision on the best information available at the time. So next is a list of textbooks. There is Breastfeeding Answers by Moorbacher, Breastfeeding and Human Lactation by Wambach and Spencer, the Breastfeeding Atlas by Barbara Wilson Clay and Kay Hoover, the Interdisciplinary Lactation Care Core Curriculum, which released its second edition, edited by Campbell, Lawers, Mano, and Spencer. And last but not least, Breastfeeding, a guide for the medical profession by doctors Ruth and Robert Lawrence. Before passing it back to Angela, I want to leave you with this quote. It says, "Many students cannot pass their exam because they failed to sacrifice the minimum capital of time and money. Simply put, investing time, and yes, sometimes money, can make all the difference between passing or failing." Angela?
Thanks, Sekeita. Those were all really great suggestions. I really appreciate it. So now we're going to talk about actual strategies to take the exam. So the first thing I want to mention is mnemonics. It is using words or first letters of a sentence in order to remember things. This may be one thing that you like utilizing when you're studying. For example, the word latch, the LATCH is an acronym which stands for different things that you want to evaluate when you're actually evaluating someone's latch and positioning. So latch, LATCH, stands for L for latch, A for audible swallow, T for nipple type, C for comfort, and H for the amount of help which is needed, LATCH. Now, another mnemonic is that a previous student suggested to me was how to remember which hormones come from which part of the pituitary gland. PAP for prolactin is created in the anterior pituitary, and OP or OPP, which is for oxytocin, in the posterior pituitary. That's something that always helps me. Or you can also use the trick of using the first word of a sentence in order to jog your memory. This old sentence, which you may have learned in biology class, might help you remember the names of the cranial nerves. You can also make up a few of your own to remember lists of things. If there are lists of information to learn, remember to divide and conquer. Subdivide the list into smaller segments. Consider the rules of 3. 3 items seems to be the easiest number of things to remember. Now you can take practice exams in QBank. It's a wonderful tool that LER has to help you with your studies. You can practice the questions in tutor mode to learn the rationale behind the answers, or you can take it in test mode in order to simulate the online testing experience. Now I'll take a quick walkthrough of some of the ways that which you can utilize it. Feel free to listen to this recording again for ideas on how to use QBank. So you can go to QBank and turn off tutor mode and set it to untimed to get a feel for the questions without the pressure of taking the exam in a short amount of time. Choose how many questions you would like in each category from the topics in the detailed content outline. To start with, you may want to take a smaller, say, 50 question test. For now, choose all of the categories or topics from the detailed content outline. Later, if you want to study only one area, you can do that. Then take the test. Note that you can mark a question that you're not sure about and that you want to review later. At the end, it tells you which questions you marked. You submit for scoring, and then you can see which questions you got wrong, see what you marked, what was right, what was wrong, and where you need to take a deeper dive. Where do you need to study a little bit more? The second thing you want to do is then take a test in tutor mode. And then a few days before the exam, you may want to choose test mode and simulate the IBLCE exam and take the 175 question test. So the things that you want to look for are normal infant weight gain. You want to know what's normal, such as weight gain. You also want to know what the normal stages of development are. That will help you to know when things are abnormal and when you need interventions. Study your difficult topics with others, especially those who don't know anything about lactation. For example, I've been known to be in line or be visiting with a friend. A sympathetic ear is always helpful. And if I can take something such as the neuroendocrine arc in the physiology of lactation and explain it to someone who knows nothing about it, let's say someone who's an educator, or let's say someone who is a plumber, a carpenter, and if you can explain that concept of the hormones and the physiology of lactation to someone who knows nothing about it, then that's really helpful. That is helpful and lets you know, listen, if I can break this down and if I can explain it to someone who isn't in the profession or isn't a birth worker, then that's fantastic. That means I know it really well so that I can convey it to someone else. The other things that you can do is that if you're one who likes to use flashcards, you can take flashcards and ask a friend of yours or ask maybe one of your children to read you the flashcards, and then you can respond and you can answer. This way you're getting more people in your community involved with helping you to prepare. Also take a look at a picture. If you're taking a look at a picture, you want to describe what you see, and you may want to describe it out loud. You may want to jot down some notes. You know, do you notice any discoloration? Let's say if you're looking at a breast, what discolorations do you see on the breast itself? You may want to note if there's any trauma, let's say, to the nipple. You may want to notice if there's any bruising that's obvious. You may want to see if there's any areas which are swollen. So describe those things, explain yourself and describe these different things. Let's say if you are looking at a breast and there is an opening on the breast, right? Is that something which is an abscess? Is that something which is a post-surgical drainage of the abscess? So describe what you see in those images, and that's going to help you when you're studying as well. The exam consists of 175 questions. Now, some are regular questions such as recall, and some are related to pictures, and some will be case studies. There are different types of questions. The case studies are different types of questions where you will see a scenario, you'll answer a question, and then the next question will build on that same case study. Questions on the exam are often referred to as items. So you may, hear that term being used. You will have 4 hours to complete the exam or 240 minutes. The whole exam is multiple choice questions. Each item is made up of a stem or the actual question. And then there are several choices, usually 4, but not always. The stem of the item can be phrased as a question, a partial sentence, or a best choice. In this example, the stem is about the onset of copious milk production. It can be phrased as a question. What is the stage when copious milk is produced? A partial sentence, the onset of copious milk production is called, or a best choice question. What is the best description of the onset of copious milk production? They are all asking the same concept, just in different forms. And the choices in this example are lactogenesis 1, 2, 3, or 4. Read the stem of the question and answer the question mentally. Think about what the correct answer would be. Read the choices. You can eliminate the ones that you know are not correct so they don't distract you. And you can concentrate on differentiating the choices that are left. Tentatively choose the first answer on the list that seems correct. Then compare the other selections to that one. If there is a better answer, then select that one and continue on. Maybe another answer will be even better. Do a final check to ensure that you read the question right. If you don't find one that you think is correct, read the stem again, carefully, to make sure you understood. The perfect answer may not be one of the choices, so choose the best one. And just venture a guess if you're not sure. Note all of the information in the stem. It's probably there for a reason. And the distractors are the possible answers, not in the stem. Watch for words that change the meaning of the word or change the meaning of what came before. Words such as but, however, although, even though, while, despite, in spite of, and regardless of. Watch the context of the question. An answer can be right, but not correct for this situation. So you really want to watch that context. Choices will fall into 3 categories: sophisticated distractors and unsophisticated distractors. An unsophisticated distractor is something that's easy that you might know anyway, or something that's obviously wrong. And of course, there is the correct answer. So there will be 3 choices for you to eliminate. And now I'm going to kick it over to Sekeita, who's going to talk to us about those first impressions, which are so important. Sekeita?
Yes, thank you, Angela. First impressions. Just know your first impression is usually correct. Don't second guess yourself. I know I've done that several times and I was kicking myself afterward, like, why did you change your answer? You had it right. But Angela was just talking about the stem of the question. So I want to just kind of reiterate and reinforce to read the stem of the question all the way through, and then each possible answer all the way through, and then indicate your answer. Try not to read more into the question than what is really asking you. Use the options themselves to try to provide you with some subtle hints or clues about the things you need to know. The other thing you want to watch for is you want to watch for questions that have always scenarios. Rarely is there a situation in lactation that will fall into the always category. You can have situations that are usually and most of the time, but not always. The other thing is there may not be any choices that are all of the above for the answers. These are generally easy to answer and they don't really show that you know the material well. So you may not see those. Remember again that your first impression is usually right, so be real reluctant to change your answer unless you get like a jolt of inspiration that, oh, and you know that you know that you know that you chose the wrong answer. You can fix it. But I'm sure that this has happened to not just me, but some of you, that you've done this only to find out that you had it right before you changed. We're going to talk about guessing. There are times to guess. When taking a multiple choice test, though, it's important to know when to guess. If you are uncertain of a correct answer, things that you can do, you can eliminate the options that you know are definitely wrong and then make your choice. And then you can flag the question so that you can reconsider or go back to it at the end of the exam if you have time. If you really have no idea what this question is asking you, you have a 25% chance of guessing correctly. And if you can eliminate at least one option, that increases your odds to about 33%. So what am I saying? Don't waste a whole bunch of time. If you really have no idea, try to use that method. If you're not sure about a number answer, so there's a question, they give you some numbers, they give you a range of numbers, and you're not sure about the answer, toss out the high and toss out the low and consider the middle range numbers. If you have no idea of the answer, check for like look-alike options or check for the most inclusive option, the option that contains the most information, the longest sentence, so to speak. Think about what it might be similar to or anything you've read. Also, try to relate some of the questions, if you're unsure, to some of your practice, to some things that you've practiced or seen in practice or even heard in practice. If one of the options is totally unfamiliar, be suspicious. Something that you've never seen or heard before or seems to be unrelated to the STEM, it is likely a distractor, as Angela just talked about. So some exam statisticians, got it right, recommend setting up a predetermined strategy for guessing on questions that you're clueless about. So some of the suggestions include, after eliminating the obvious wrong answer, selecting the first option or the last option. It's up to you, but be consistent. If you always select the answer in the same position, then you increase your odds that your guess will be randomly correct. Picture items. Angela has already talked about half of the questions will be based on a picture. With pictures, you may have to define a diagnosis or a condition. You may have to distinguish between what's normal and abnormal. You may have to determine a child's age by their posture, size, or behavior. If you can see this picture on the left, you see such an adorable little one sitting, just sitting and looking. But you may be asked, what's the age of this child? Something like that. Not that simple, but maybe. You also might have to determine a problem. like a compression stripe on a nipple due to a shallow latch, or asymmetrical breasts in the example on the right side. A picture can be used also in a case study where you are asked to recommend a plan of care or a care plan and decide what you would recommend first or next. So those are generally how picture items are situated and what they look like. When answering a picture item, read the question first, then look at the image. The question itself will define the purpose of the picture. So reading the question first will help you focus on what the question is really referring to faster than just looking at the picture first. If the answer is not immediately obvious to you and visually, so it's not easy, divide the picture into quadrants and look at each part closely. Images may not be as obvious as the picture on the top, which is massive mastitis that looks like it hurts. A more likely image is the redness seen just under the nipple on the image at the bottom. It's a little more subtle. So read the question first, look at the picture, read the question again, and then look at the image one more time. Then choose your answer. Some of the images are not perfect. Some may appear dated. Some may not seem clear. As someone who takes photos to teach breastfeeding concepts, it is challenging to get good clinical images with proper lighting, setting, context. Everything just has to align and be perfect. But remember that the IBLCE is comprised of IBCLCs. They have thoroughly reviewed the question and image to ensure that all of the information is there for you to be able to answer the question. Common problems. What are some common problems that test takers run into? First is reading too much into the question. Take all questions as face value. I'm real guilty of that, by the way. I do that all the time. That is all the information that they want you to consider. Whatever is in the question, those are the things they want you to consider. So, as the old saying goes, don't look for zebras in New York City's Central Park. Look for the most likely answer. So in Central Park, you are most likely to see a horse and not a zebra, right? This was reiterated by someone who recently sat for the exam, and they said the likelihood that a parent or baby is presenting with something rare or exotic is very low compared to the likelihood that it's, let's say, mastitis or plugged up. So prepare yourself for like the everyday scenarios. Watch for qualifiers. I talked a little bit about this. Qualifiers such as always, never, least likely, most likely, the first thing you would do, or the best choice. One of the things I want to talk about the best choices is, sometimes you get a question and there's always two answers that could be correct. Students get hung up a lot on those types of questions. Think about which one, they might be true, both might be true, but which one is the best choice if that is the question that you're being asked. And always, actually, what's the best choice? So answer the question that they're asking. Like I said, it may seem obvious. Some of them may seem obvious, but I've missed questions that I knew the answer to, but that I didn't carefully pay attention to what was being asked. So reread the question before you make your final selection. Don't pick the first good answer. There might be a better one. So read every single option, like I said. Read them all and compare. If you start eliminating the wrong answers and get down to one, then look at it and you say, well, that's not right. Start over again. It's okay. But remember to pace yourself. For those who are advanced practice nurses, midwives, or physicians, remember you need to answer the question like an IBCLC. And that is tricky. And some people may not know what I mean by that, but it's tricky when you've trained and you've been practicing as a midwife or nurse practitioner or physician for many years. And I'll just say this, that practice doesn't always reflect what best evidence is. And so in saying that, make sure that you know what the guidelines are for how the questions are being asked, and what is being asked of you is not like you're practicing. This exam is for entry level and is designed not only for medical folks, if that makes sense. So that's what I'll end with that. Or when you get stuck, I talked a little bit about when you get stuck, but sometimes you panic. So try not to panic. You may look at a question and your mind just go completely blank. That is the time to start bringing extra oxygen to your brain. Take a deep breath. And when I say this, I really mean this. Deep breath in, kind of blow it out. When you're blowing it out, relax your shoulders. Then proceed logically. Reread the question, read each of the options, eliminate the wrong answers, and make your best guess. But it is some of us will panic when our mind just go completely blank, but you just need to get that oxygen flowing. Another suggestion may be to think of a real life situation similar to the one that's in the question that's causing you to be stuck. Are there any clues? Or look for clues again in those qualifiers or any adjectives. If you're totally clueless about keywords, perhaps you could substitute it with a synonym, and that might help you understand. The exam writers are not trying to trick you. They really just want you to demonstrate that you have a level of knowledge. What is wrong with me? That is safe and prudent for lactation practice. Don't choose a familiar answer just because you are happy to see something that you're familiar with. That's another thing that sometimes happens. But if you get stuck, don't spend a lot of time. Pick an answer, flag the question, review it so you can go back, but keep your momentum going. Angela, close us out.
Happy to, Sekeita. Thank you. So now we're going to take a look at the actual exam content. And this is something that is based on previous experience and previous data that we have from the IBLCE. So one thing to remember is that the exam is known as a reference-based exam, which means that it's based on the current medical literature. It's based on literature in the current textbooks. Take a look at the compendium of research that has been validated, peer-reviewed, and in the pipeline over the past few years, and the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine's protocols. Now, things which are not included are unvalidated research. That means that additional study has not been done to support the conclusions, or additional research did not support the original study. Anecdotal materials, verbal statements, websites, and conference presentations. Other things that are written and in a peer-reviewed journal are included. The textbook, Breastfeeding and Human Lactation, for example, is an evidence-based textbook. Now, it's important not to go down a rabbit hole and think of the ifs and the buts or the one-off presentations when you're trying to answer the questions. If you hear yourself say, well, I knew of a case that's when you're going down that rabbit hole. The exam covers all of these topics as they relate to breastfeeding and human lactation. Please go to the IBLCE website, to the IBLCE documents section, and access the detailed course outline. It's been updated for 2023. You can print it out if you wish. I know some groups of candidates who will create a Google Doc and have everyone add relevant bits of information to that outline. One of the previous LER groups did this, and then they posted in the discussion and everyone added to that document. And it was very interesting. I met one of those participants at a conference a couple of weeks before the exam, and they'd actually printed it all out. And I think it was about 40 or 50 pages, and they were reviewing it during the downtimes of the conference. Really great way to multitask. Now, here's some reassuring data from the 2019 data. I created this from the information from the IBLCE. They published something called a test analysis report. It's a broad overview on the exam performance a few months after the previous exam is usually when they publish it. I have the information here to show you how well people do on the exam by cohort. Bottom line, most people pass. In April, 81% passed, and in October, 72% passed. Why is there a difference? Well, remember that the April or March exam is usually done only in English. The September or October exam is done in multiple languages. One note in the recertification by exam group, that data is just a wee bit skewed. Those who are taking the exam at the 30 to 35 year mark, there were 14 of them, 100% of them passed. Regardless, that cohort during that year scored best on the exam. Now, it doesn't hurt that they've taken that exam more than once. The previous recommendations and the requirements from IBLCE was that you had to resit the exam every 5 years. Now, the questions were not the same, but these people have been around for a minute, and many of them are actually lactation educators. And as we all know, our interns and our mentees and our students keep us on our toes because they ask all sorts of great questions that keep us looking in the textbooks and the latest research as well. In analyzing the exam results from all candidates from 2 consecutive years, you can see how these topics which topics seem to give the most difficulty. Now, yes, I do know that this is data from 2014 and 2015. However, IBLCE no longer provides this breakdown in the exam content. And the topics, the disciplines are just a little bit different. But let's take a look and compare these two. So take a look at the topics which scored below 75%. That would be immunology and infectious disease, growth parameters and developmental milestones. Now, there was a slight shift with pathology, which dropped, pharmacology and toxicology, which improved, psychology, sociology, and anthropology, which declined, and interpretation of research improved. These are areas where you may want to spend a little more time. One common question is what area should I study? You can see here the number of items for each discipline. This will give you an idea on how the test is weighed. IBLCE has a range for each topic in the detailed content outline based on the latest analysis of current IBCLCs. IBLCE chooses a specific number of items included in each topic from year to year, so that could shift by a few every exam cycle. The exam also covers all of these chronological periods, from preconception to toddlerhood, with the majority of questions clustered in the early newborn timeframe. Now, here are the test scores for the chronological stages. While you can see there are some areas of improvement with the 15 to 28 day group and a decline in this year that prenatal, in those 2 years such as a prenatal setting. It appears that the candidates are very good at the first few days, but seem to have more difficulty with older babies. Find or ask for pictures of babies at stages you do not currently work with. Some suggestions are Stanford University Library, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention based in the United States. They have a library of developmental milestones, or the Breastfeeding Atlas, which is a book that you may want to consider. Also, you can take a look at quiz questions, and you can sort of quiz yourself when you're taking a look at these images, as Sekeita mentioned before. If you're not experienced with older babies, try going to a lactation support meeting with the permission of the facilitator, of course, first, and you can observe and listen to what these new parents are talking about. So don't panic. You may be asking yourself, what should I know that I don't know that may be on the exam, but I don't know? You will be prepared. Believe in yourself. Haven't the families that you've worked with benefited from your suggestions and information? As Sekeita said, you want to pace yourself, take your vocabulary words with you wherever you go. Use little pockets of unexpected time to study. Watch for signs for excessive stress in yourself. Symptoms can include mental, social, and physical problems. Mental stress can show up as being forgetful, confused, agitated, or spacey. Social stress can show up as being irritable, argumentative, or withdrawn. And stress can show up as physical problems such as cold sores, bladder infections, eczema, GI upset, or even just catching a cold. Do what works best for you in order to reduce that stress. Okay, now we have questions. I know there have been several in the chat, and the first one I think I'll tackle is the one that I've seen most consistently, which has to do with the new ABM mastitis protocol. May I address that question, Sekeita, or would you like to?
Please do. Go ahead.
So here's the thing. The IBLCE exam is written months, if not years, a year or two before the actual time that you take the exam. Therefore, and also understand that for people who are taking the exam in languages other than English, they may not have the latest textbooks translated into the language they are most comfortable in learning or the language which is predominant in their culture and, in their country. Therefore, IBLCE is aware of this. And so things which may be hot off the presses in 2023, I can say pretty confidently are not on the 2023 exams. Items which were published in 2022 may be on the exam. Whether or not the new mastitis protocol from the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine will be on the 2023 exams is a really great question that we are unsure of. I would venture a guess. This is an Angela guess. Angela, who has no inside information, I would guess maybe not. However, IBLCE is nimble enough to potentially add one or two questions based on specific hot topics. I do know that the mastitis protocol is something which has had various questions about it brought forward, and the nature of this webinar does not allow me to go deeper into that conversation. So I think that there is a possibility that there would be one, so it's important to know it. But remember not to take a look at it from a very black and white perspective. The mastitis spectrum and that protocol are things which are on a continuum. And the pendulum for how to manage and deal with mastitis, as well as how to identify mastitis, is something which is currently in the midst of a shift. So I know that wasn't like a really great black and white answer to your very black and white question, and I do apologize. But frankly, none of us know. Sekeita, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I want to add perspective a little bit. When we talk about evidence-informed or evidence-based information, just know that whenever something is new and it's newly published as it relates to guidelines, it takes a few years to even implement it into practice. And I don't know if you all have read the protocol, but I have it right here, and it's several pages. And
Exactly.
it's something that I have to keep referring back to. And so think about this. This is an entry level exam. If there is anything about it, it is going to be something that's basic. I can't say either way, but I can say from, again, this evidence-based informed lens of things are slow to get into practice. And so the notion that it would be on the test, I would say if it is, I would be surprised. I'll just leave it there. Thanks, Angela.
Right. And as people are commenting in the questions, and again, for those of you who may have joined us a little late, please do type in where you're participating today, because it's really interesting. We have different countries, states around the United States, provinces, and so it's been really fun to see. But yes, the ABM protocol has not been translated into multiple languages. It is something which has been suggested, evidence-informed, and again, as I said, there is debate and people are commenting on that as well. Someone is asking about using heat but not cold, and yet, whenever you see, for example, edema in a breast, Is it always mastitis? Or could it be something else, right? Heat has been known to be effective. Cold has been known to be effective. And so you also want to take into account some of the clinical practices that have been utilized. Now, if, for example, in your country, it is common to have the lactating person stand on their head in order to help with mastitis. If you don't see that practice duplicated in other countries around the world, chances are that is something which is unique to your setting and may not be on the exam. And so if in doubt, you can take a look at some of those protocols, but remember, it's not a black and white sort of thing. Take a look at the STEM, take a look at the question, and be able to take a look at that context that we've been talking about during this webinar. Okay.
There is a question, Angela, that says, can you review how the test is graded and reviewed? Remember that this is an international test. Some tests are taken via the computer. Some tests are taken in person. There's various ways. With any test of a entry level or certification, most educators and most organizations will look at the overall every question. And let's just say 50% of the folks got question 2 wrong. That may be a question that the group of people that are responsible for the exam take a look at and say, hey, that was a poorly written question. Let's just throw that out. So I don't know the exact process. I can't give you the algorithm. Angela, go ahead. Angela raised her hand. She knows it. She knows it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so what they do is they actually take a look at how the question performed and whether or not it was a sophisticated distractor that really tripped a lot of people up. And so they actually take a look psychometrically at how each individual question performed. And not only that, but they'll also take a look at how they performed in different languages. So for example, let's say that everyone missed question 38 who took the exam in Japanese. Well, there could be an issue with that translation. Now understand, IBLCE, when they create an exam, they translate the exam and then they back translate the exam, which is really the gold standard for translations. And so because they're looking at it from both angles, they will see how well did this question perform? Could this be statistically, psychometrically explained by one thing or another or not? And so there are a number of questions which are removed if needed, and then the exam is rescored. So it's not a matter of, if a lot of people got a question wrong, it could just be that it was a really sophisticated distractor. It could be that the question was not worded properly, or when there's a second review of it at the end, when they're taking a look at everything from a statistical perspective, there may be a rationale that says, yes, this question really should be rewritten. It's something that we should, so in other words, you're not going to be, if they decide later that the question could have been written better, in order to allow this to psychometrically prove that it can distinguish between someone who is a novice or an entry-level IBCLC, then yes, they will remove the question. And so just know that that's why it's best to answer it according to what you know to be true. Provide your best response. Do answer every question, and those questions, just know that that's the reason why it takes so long to get your exam results back. To Sekeita's point, some people will take it virtually, based in a testing center, or some people maybe still be able to do the live remote proctoring and may be able to take it from their home or from another location. But there are a few far-flung places around the world where they are going to take it in paper and pencil. I think that's almost been eliminated, but as we know that there are, for example, unstable internet connections, and there may not be a testing site within that country. Therefore, there may be a requirement for paper and pencil to actually be utilized. So I went on a little bit. I apologize. I hope that was helpful.
No worries. There's one more question. What about COVID and vaccines? I'm going to assume that the question is related to the COVID vaccine. But vaccines, definitely know the vaccines, know what recommendations are. Think about, again, internationally, your international organizations and not anything local like US specific organizations. So, and I say that because, for example, the American Academy of Pediatrics just now aligned their recommendations with the World Health Organization's recommendations for breastfeeding, right? And so you want to just make sure that you are really thinking about whatever topic you have from a global aspect. But will COVID is ever fluid. It's still fluid. There's not a lot of, research out there. I would be shocked, but again, just kind of know general principles.
That makes sense. Good. Someone asked if they will give you a breakdown of your answers. They only do it in an aggregate. So in other words, you're not going to get the question and exactly which one you got wrong and why. That's the beauty of our QBank that a lot of students really do like, is that we tell you, once you answer the question, we actually provide you with the rationale and then additional areas where you can do some review. So if you did get that question wrong in our QBank, then we'll tell you where you can do some additional study. IBLCE doesn't do that. So they give it to you in the aggregate based on the detailed content outline. So let's say psychology, sociology, and anthropology, they'll tell you the number of items that were in that section, and then they'll tell you the number of questions that you got correct. So that is the information that they will need. Someone else is asking, what score do you need to pass the exam? So there isn't a specific cutoff. That is something which is decided every year. And again, it's because they will have 175 questions, but they may eliminate a few of them and then they rescore it, and then it's based upon that. And so the IBLCE Exam Development Committee actually comes up with that number every year based on psychometric advice from the psychometrician. Someone is asking if our QBank has questions that align with the new sections added in the new detailed course outline. Absolutely. Julie, who's from our customer support team, is our QBank expert, and she has made sure to ensure that these have been aligned. IBLCE came out with this new 2023 detailed content outline last year, and so it's given us ample time to prepare. So yes, it aligns with the current.
Someone asked again about COVID protocols, vaccines, and the mastitis protocol. Not likely, but if you didn't catch the whole synopsis that we just went through, we invite you to watch the recording as to what our thoughts are regarding the mastitis or the COVID protocol and vaccines. Again, we have no insider information. I'm going by when I last took the exam myself. And I had to take it twice. So thank goodness that now you don't have to take it twice.
Because you passed the first time and then had to recertify by exam at 10 years, right,
yes,
Sekeita?
Yes, I certified by exam in 10 years,
Right.
and now that is not the case, unless you want to, actually.
You can. Some people are great test takers,
yes,
and they want to sit that exam every 5 years.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. That's great. Not it.
All right.
Excellent.
I don't see any more questions, Angela. Do you?
I don't. Thank you so much. This has been great.
This has been great. So thank you all for joining us. I saw some people, they said they were in their living room. I saw people from all over the world. Thank you for joining us. We really hope that you take heed to all the information that we've shared with you. If you are able to, join that Facebook group. Also, download the handouts and get your planning study, get it going really sooner than later. We appreciate you all, and don't hesitate to reach out to LER with any questions or concerns. Angela.
Thank you all very much for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, everybody.